The red dust of Nexus Prime swirled around Lieutenant Cade Thompson's boots as he checked his rifle for the third time that morning. The frontier colony stretched before him like a wound carved into the planet's surface-prived structures, and defensive barriers marking humanity's tenuous foothold at the edge of known space. 3 years he'd been stationed here, 3 years of watching the horizon for threats that came more often than supply ships. Convoys 10 minutes out. Corporal Briggs called from the communications array, his voice tight with the same tension that had plagued them all since the insurgent attacks had intensified. The rebels, a mixed group of alien separatists and human extremists, wanted the alliance between Earth and the Krolix Empire dissolved, preferably in blood. Cade squinted against the harsh morning sun, watching the approach route through his scope. The supply convoy was crucial. They were down to their last week of medical supplies and ammunition. Losing this shipment would mean the first explosion lit up the canyon wall in a bloom of orange fire. Ambush! Cade shouted, diving behind the nearest barrier as plasma fire streaked overhead. The convoy vehicles were trapped in the narrow pass, sitting ducks for the insurgents positioned on the high ground. All units, defensive positions, cover the convoy. A battle erupted with vicious intensity. Cade's squad returned fire, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. The insurgents had planned this perfectly, catching them in a crossfire that left little room for maneuvering. Through the chaos, Cade saw the convoy's escort vehicles burning, their crews either dead or pinned down. A movement on his left flank caught his attention. 3 insurgents breaking cover, rushing toward the supply trucks Cade sprinted from. His position, knowing he had to stop them before they reached the medical supplies. His legs pumped hard against the loose gravel, his breath coming in sharp bursts as plasma bolts sizzled past his head. He was 20 meters from the insurgents when he realized his mistake. 2 more enemies emerged from behind the convoy truck, their weapons already trained on him. Time slowed as he saw the plasma rifles charging, the telltale blue glow that meant death. He was caught in the open, nowhere to run, no cover within. Reached out, the shots never came. Instead, a towering figure in battle-scarred armor dropped from the truck's roof like an avenging angel, landing between Cade and the insurgents with bone-crushing impact. The new arrival moved with deadly precision, a massive rifle in capable hands, cutting down threats with surgical accuracy. In seconds, all 5 insurgents lay motionless in the red dust. Cade scrambled to his feet, staring at his unexpected savior. The figure stood nearly 7 feet tall, encased in layered combat armor that bore the distinctive markings of the Krolix Empire. The armor was functional rather than ornate scarred metal plates that spoke of countless battles, integrated systems that hummed with barely contained power. A full helmet obscured the wearer's face, but the way they moved suggested deadly competence earned through blood and experience. "You're welcome," came a voice from the helmet's speaker system. The tone was clipped, professional, and unmistakably female despite the electronic distortion. "I thank you," Cade managed, still processing how close he'd come to death. "I'm Lieutenant Thompson, Colonial Defense Force." The armored figure was already moving, checking the convoy for additional threats. "Thesa of the Krolix 4th Legion. Try not to get yourself killed before the mission is complete, Lieutenant." The battle was winding down, the surviving insurgents retreating into the Badlands. Cade watched as Thesa coordinated with the convoy. Survivors, her movements efficient and commanding. Even through the armor, there was something captivating about her presence, a dangerous grace that suggested she was equally comfortable in diplomacy or combat. "How long have you been with the convoy?" Cade asked as they secured the area. "Since the last station. Intelligence suggested an ambush was likely." Thesa's helmet turned toward him, and though he couldn't see her face, he felt the weight of her attention. "Your defensive positions were adequate, but your response time needs improvement." Heat rose in Cade's cheeks. "We're not exactly dealing with standard military doctrine out here. That's obvious." She shouldered her rifle and began walking toward the colony's main gate. "The insurgents will return in greater numbers. You'll need better coordination if you want to survive." As she walked away, Cade found himself staring at the imposing figure. The armor revealed nothing of the person beneath, no hint of the individual behind the warrior's facade. For reasons he couldn't explain, that mystery intrigued him more than it should have. The convoy limped into the colony an hour later, its precious cargo intact thanks to Thesa's intervention. As the supplies were unloaded and distributed, Cade learned that she would be staying indefinitely, attached to the Colonial Defense Force as a military advisor. The thought of working alongside her filled him with equal parts anticipation and uncertainty. That night, as he filed his after-action report, Cade kept glancing toward the barracks where Thesa had been quartered. The warrior who had saved his life remained an enigma, hidden behind layers of armor and military protocol. But something told him that beneath that intimidating exterior lay secrets worth discovering, if he could find a way past the walls she'd built around herself. 3 months had passed since Thesa's arrival on Nexus Prime, and Lieutenant Cade Thompson had learned to read the subtle signs that preceded her rare moments of openness. The way her armored shoulders would relax slightly when they shared evening rations. How her voice lost its military edge during the quiet hours of night watch. These glimpses beneath her warrior's facade had become precious to him, small victories in a war he hadn't realized he was fighting. Their partnership had evolved into something formidable, where Cade brought intimate knowledge of the colonies, terrain, and the insurgents' tactics. Thesa provided advanced combat training and strategic thinking that had saved countless lives. The Colonial Defense Force had transformed under her guidance, becoming a cohesive unit capable of repelling attacks that would have overwhelmed them months earlier. "Contact, 2 o'clock. Thesa's voice crackled through the comm as they approached the abandoned mining facility. Intelligence had suggested the insurgents were using it as a weapons cache, and destroying it could cripple their operations for months. Cade adjusted his position, moving with the fluid precision Thesa had drilled into him. "I count 6 heat signatures. Standard patrol pattern. Confirmed. We wait for their rotation, then move on my signal." They lay prone on the ridge overlooking the facility, the desert wind carrying the scent of metal and ozone. In the dying light of Nexus Prime's twin suns, Cade found himself studying Thesa's profile. Even through her helmet's polarized visor, he could sense her complete focus, the predatory stillness that preceded violence. The patrol rotated as predicted. Thesa's hand signal sent them moving down the slope in perfect synchronization. 2 shadows converging on their target. The first 2 sentries never knew what hit them. Thesa's movements were poetry written in lethal grace, each strike calculated for maximum efficiency with minimal noise. Inside the facility, they discovered more than weapons. Crates of medical supplies bearing colonial markings filled one chamber resources, stolen from previous convoy raids. Another room contained detailed maps of the colony's defensive positions, some marked with dates suggesting planned attacks. "This is bigger than we thought," Cade whispered, photographing the intelligence with his tactical scanner. "They're planning something major." Thesa was examining a particular map when the explosion rocked the facility. The entrance they'd used collapsed in a shower of debris, emergency lighting casting everything in hellish red. Through the dust and smoke, Cade could hear vehicles approaching. They'd walked into a trap. "Alternative exit?" Thesa asked, her voice calm despite their circumstances. "Maintenance tunnels, but they lead to the old mine shafts. Could be unstable. Better than certain death." She was already moving toward the tunnel entrance, her armor's integrated lights cutting through the darkness. Stay close. The tunnels were a nightmare of narrow passages and unstable supports. More than once, Cade heard the ominous creaking of stressed metal above their heads. They'd been crawling for what felt like hours when Thesa suddenly stopped. "Dead end," she announced, her light illuminating a wall of collapsed rock. "We'll have to backtrack." But the sounds of pursuit echoed from behind them. The insurgents had found their trail. They were trapped in a space barely wide enough for Thesa's armored form, with enemies approaching from their only escape route. "There," Cade pointed to a gap between fallen support beams. "It's tight, but it might lead to another tunnel." Thesa studied the opening, then began the laborious process of removing equipment to squeeze through. Cade watched, mesmerized, as she detached external armor plating with practiced efficiency. For the first time, he saw glimpses of the form beneath sleek curves that suggested femininity despite her warrior's build, movement that spoke of natural grace enhanced by years of combat training. "Stop staring and help me with this," she sighed, though her tone carried less bite than usual. They worked together in the cramped space, their bodies pressed close by necessity. Cade felt the warmth radiating from her armor's climate control system, caught the faint scent of something floral that seemed impossibly delicate for a warrior. When their hands touched while maneuvering a piece of equipment, she didn't pull away immediately. "Why did you save me that first day?" he asked quietly, his voice barely audible over the approaching footsteps. Thesa paused in her work, her helmet turning toward him. It was tactically sound. "The mission required." "That's not what I'm asking." For a long moment, she was silent. Then, so quietly, he almost missed it, "Because I saw something worth saving." They made it through the gap just as the insurgents reached their hiding spot. The new tunnel led to an abandoned mining elevator. It carried them to the surface, emerging under the cover of darkness. The walk back to the colony passed in contemplative silence, both of them processing what had happened in those claustrophobic depths. Back at the base, as they filed their mission report, Cade found himself studying Thesa with new eyes. She'd reassembled her armor's external components, once again becoming the intimidating warrior who'd first saved his life. But now he knew there was something more beneath that imposing exterior, something vulnerable and precious that she guarded as carefully as any military secret. "The intelligence we gathered suggests a major offensive within the week," Thesa said, reviewing their tactical scanner's contents. "I recommend increasing patrol frequency and establishing additional defensive positions." "Agreed." Cade hesitated. "Then, Thesa?" "Earlier, when you said you saw something worth saving." She looked up from the scanner, and though he couldn't see her face, he felt the weight of her attention. "Some things are better left unsaid, Lieutenant. Maybe, or maybe they're the most important things of all." She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't respond. Then, "My people have a saying, 'The heart that beats in battle belongs to war, not to the warrior.' It's safer that way." "Safer for who?" "For everyone." She stood, gathering her equipment. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's missions won't wait for philosophical discussions." As she walked away, Cade realized he was falling for someone he'd never truly seen, someone who hid behind armor both literal and metaphorical. The challenge wasn't just surviving the war anymore. It was finding a way to reach the woman beneath. The warrior's mask, before either the insurgents or her own fears destroyed any chance they might have. The insurgent offensive had been repelled, but at a cost. Nexus Prime bore the scars of 3 days of relentless fighting scorched Earth, damaged structures, and the weight of lives lost defending their small corner of the galaxy. In the aftermath, an unusual quiet had settled over the colony, the kind of stillness that comes after a storm when survivors count their blessings and mourn their losses. Cade found Thesa where he'd expected, standing at the observation deck that overlooked the colony's main settlement. The twin suns were setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson that softened the harsh edges of their frontier. World. She'd removed her helmet, and for the first time, he caught a glimpse of her profile in the dying light. Even that partial view took his breath away. Her features were elegant, with the distinctive bone structure of the Krollik's high cheekbones, and a refined jawline that spoke of both strength and beauty. Her skin held a subtle scaled texture that caught the light like scattered diamonds, and her hair, what he could see of it, was a deep auburn that seemed to hold fire in its depths. "The casualty reports are better than expected," he said, approaching. Slowly. 3 months of working together had taught him to read her moods, and tonight she seemed more contemplative than usual. 37 wounded, 12 dead, she replied without turning. On my world, we would call this a victory. Here, it feels like a defeat, because you've learned to see these people as more than tactical assets. She finally looked at him, and the impact of her full attention nearly staggered him. Her eyes were a striking amber that seemed to glow with inner light, ancient and wise and impossibly beautiful. There was vulnerability there, too, carefully hidden but visible to someone who'd learned to look beyond her armor. "Is that what you think?" she asked, her voice softer than usual without the helmet's electronic distortion. "I think you came here expecting to find soldiers, and instead you found a community. People worth protecting, not just positions worth defending." Thesa turned back to the view, her hands resting on the railing. "My people believe that attachment weakens a warrior. That caring too much about individuals compromises judgment. And what do you believe?" "I believe I've been compromised. Since the day I met you." The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. Cade stepped closer, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her armor's power systems, close enough to catch the subtle scent. He'd noticed in the tunnel something floral and entirely feminine that seemed to define everything the armor was meant to hide. "The SSA ... coupled he began, but she held up a hand. "Don't. Once certain words are spoken, they can't be taken back." "Maybe they shouldn't be taken back." She turned to face him fully, and he saw the war playing out in her expression duty against desire, training against instinct. "You don't understand what you're asking. My people don single quotes T ... We don't form attachments the way humans do. What I feel for you goes against everything I was raised to believe." Cade reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he covered her gaunted hand with his. "Then maybe it's time to believe in something new." For a moment, he thought she would retreat back into her professional shell. Instead, she moved closer, close enough that he could see the conflict in those remarkable eyes. "I've watched you for months," she whispered. "The way you care for your people, the risks you take for others. You make me want things I never thought I could want." "What things?" "To be seen. To be known as more than just a weapon." Her voice broke slightly. "To be touched without armor between us." The confession shattered the last of his restraint. Cade cupped her face with his free hand, marveling at the warmth of her skin, the delicate scales that felt like silk beneath his palm. "I see you," he said. "Not the warrior, not the armor. You." Their first kiss was tentative, careful two people from different worlds learning the language of intimacy. Her lips were soft and warm, slightly parted in surprise at her own boldness. When they broke apart, she was trembling. "My quarters," she whispered. "If we're going to do this, I want privacy." Her room was Spartan, functional, exactly what he'd expected from a career soldier. But there were small personal touches. A holographic star chart of what he assumed was her home system. A small carved figure that looked like a family heirloom. And books on human culture that suggested she'd been trying to understand him as much as he'd been trying to understand her. "Help me," she said, turning her back to him. Her armor had dozens of release points, seals and catches that required precise manipulation. As each piece came away, he saw more of the woman beneath the graceful curve of her spine, the lean. Muscle built through years of combat training, skin that seemed to glow with its own inner light. She wore a form-fitting bodysuit beneath the armor, designed for climate control and protection. Even this she removed, turning to face him with a vulnerability that made his heart race. Her body was beautiful in ways that transcended species feminine. Curves balanced with the strength of a warrior, skin marked with old scars that told the story of a life spent in service to others. "I've never done this," she admitted, her hands trembling as she reached for him. "Never allowed myself to be this exposed." "We'll go slow," he promised, his own hands shaking as he began removing his uniform. "We have all night." Their lovemaking was tentative at first, two explorers mapping unknown territory. Her skin was warmer than human normal, sensitive in unexpected places. She gasped when he traced the scales along her collarbone, arched beneath him when he discovered the sensitive spot where her neck met her shoulder. Later, as they lay entwined in her narrow military cot, she traced patterns on his chest with one finger. "This changes everything," she said quietly. "Does it have to? On the battlefield, I can't afford to worry about losing you. If my feelings compromise my judgment, then we'll make sure they don't." He caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. "We're stronger together, Thissa. Today proved that." She was quiet for a long time, her head resting on his shoulder. Finally, "My real name is Thissa Vaughn of the Moonrise Cliffs. In my language, it means one who guards the light. It's beautiful. Like you, beautiful things break easily in war. Not if they're protected by someone who loves them." The word hung between them, heavy with implication. She lifted her head to look at him, those amber eyes searching his face. "Love?" "Love," he confirmed, surprised by how easily the truth came. "I love you, Thissa Vaughn of the Moonrise Cliffs. All of you, the warrior and the woman, the strength and the vulnerability." Tears gathered in her eyes, the first he'd ever seen from her. "My people have no word for what I feel for. You?" The closest translation would be soul bond, a connection that transcends death itself. They made love again, slower this time, memorizing each touch and kiss as if they might need to survive on these memories. In the darkness of her quarters, with her armor scattered on the floor like discarded identity, they found something neither had expected: a love that made them more than the sum of their parts. As dawn approached, reality intruded. She would have to don her armor again, return to being the untouchable warrior who led from the front. He would have to pretend that seeing her vulnerable and beautiful and utterly human hadn't changed him fundamentally. "Promise me something," she said as she began reassembling her protective shell. "Whatever happens, remember this. Remember me like this." "Nothing's going to happen," he assured her, but even as he said it, he felt the weight of prophecy in her words. "We'll have other nights." She was almost fully armored when she turned back to him, her helmet in her hands. "Cade, if something does happen, if I don't make it back from a mission, stop. Promise me you'll know that every moment with you was worth a lifetime of safety." She donned her helmet, becoming once again the intimidating warrior who'd first saved his life. But now he knew the woman beneath, and that knowledge changed everything. "I promise," he said, though the words felt like signing his own death warrant. The intelligence arrived. At dawn, coded transmissions intercepted from insurgent forces, decoded by the colony's best cryptographers. The message was chilling in its simplicity. A coordinated strike on 3 major colonies simultaneously, designed to shatter the human-Krolix alliance and drive both species from the Outer Rim territories. Nexus Prime was the primary target, its destruction meant to serve as an example to other frontier settlements. Estimated force composition suggests they're bringing everything they have, Colonel Martinez said, his weathered face grim as he briefed the senior staff. At least 200 fighters, heavy weapons, and intelligence suggests they've acquired military-grade plasma artillery. Cade studied the tactical displays, his heart sinking as he recognized the scope of the threat. The insurgents had spent months preparing for this assault, gathering resources and personnel from across the sector. This wasn't another raid. This was an attempt at genocide. Defensive positions won't hold against those numbers, Thesa said, her armored form imposing even in the crowded briefing room. We need to disrupt their staging area before they can coordinate the attack. That staging area is 40 kilometers into hostile territory, Martinez replied. Getting a team there, undetected, would be nearly impossible. Getting them back. He left the sentence unfinished. A small team might succeed where a large force would fail, Thesa continued, her tactical mind already working through possibilities. 2 operatives, moving fast and light, could reach the target before the insurgents expect any response. Cade felt cold certainty settle in his stomach. You're talking about a suicide mission. I'm talking about the only option that gives this colony a chance of survival. Thesa's helmet turned toward him, and though he couldn't see her face, he felt the weight of her attention. The mission requires someone with intimate knowledge of the terrain and someone with the combat skills to complete the objective. Absolutely. Not, Martinez said. I won't authorize sending 2 of my best people on a mission with no extraction plan. Colonel, Thesa's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to command. With respect, you're not authorizing anything. As a Krolyk's military advisor, I'm volunteering for this mission. Lieutenant Thompson's participation is his choice. All eyes turned to Cade. He knew what the smart decision was: stay with the colony, help coordinate the defense, hope that somehow they could weather the storm. But looking at Thesa's armored form, remembering the woman beneath the warrior's shell, he realized there was only one choice he could live with. I volunteer, he said quietly. 6 hours later, they were moving through the Badlands under cover of darkness. Their hoverbike cut silently through the desert landscape, advanced stealth systems masking their approach from insurgent sensors. Cade piloted while Thesa monitored their route and the enemy communications they'd been intercepting. Chatters. Increasing, she reported through their private comm channel. They're moving faster than expected. We have maybe 4 hours before they begin the assault. The staging area was a fortified canyon deep in the wasteland, chosen for its natural defenses and proximity to several major settlements. Intelligence suggested it housed not just personnel and weapons, but the command and control systems coordinating the entire offensive. Destroying it would cripple the insurgent forces, but getting close enough to plant the charges would require penetrating layers of security. They abandoned the hoverbike 3 kilometers from the target and proceeded on foot. The canyon approach was heavily guarded, but Thesa's enhanced sensors and Kadi's knowledge of local geology allowed them to find a route through the old lava tubes that honeycombed the region. Contact, Thesa whispered as they emerged near the canyon floor. 4 guards, standard patrol pattern. The infiltration was textbook perfect silent takedowns, careful movement, precise placement of their explosive charges. They'd nearly completed the mission when everything went wrong. Lieutenant Thompson, step away from the device. The voice came from behind them, accompanied by the distinctive whine of charging plasma weapons. Cade turned slowly to find a dozen insurgents. Emerging from concealment, their leader a scarred human with the insignia of a former colonial marine, holding a rifle trained on Thesa. Captain Valdez, Cade said, recognizing the man from intelligence briefings. Didn't expect to find you out here personally. Wouldn't miss it, Valdez replied with a cold smile. The death of the great Krolyk's warrior and her pet human will be the perfect prelude to our victory. The charges are already armed, Thesa said calmly. You have perhaps 2 minutes to evacuate the area. No, I don't think so. Valdez gestured, and 2 of his men began working on the nearest explosive device. My people are quite skilled at disarming such toys, but I appreciate the gesture. Cade's mind raced through options, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. The mission was failing, and with it, any hope Nexus Prime had of surviving the coming assault. Unless ... he caught Thesa's attention with a subtle hand signal, one she'd taught him during their months of working together. Her helmet dipped almost imperceptibly, she understood. You know, Cade said conversationally, there's something you should know about Krolek's combat armor. Enlighten me, Valdez said, his attention focused on Cade. It has a built-in deadman switch. If the wearer's vital signs stop, it triggers a localized EMP burst. The lie came easily, delivered with the confidence of absolute truth. Useful for denying enemy forces access to advanced technology. Valdez's eyes narrowed. You're bluffing. Am I? Cade stepped closer to Thesa, noting how her stance had shifted slightly, a minute adjustment that prepared her for explosive movement. Care to test the theory? The moment of hesitation was all they needed. Thesa erupted into motion, her rifle cutting down 3 insurgents before they could react. Cade dove for cover, drawing his sidearm and adding his fire to hers. The canyon erupted in chaos, plasma bolts lighting up the darkness like deadly fireworks. But there were too many of them, and Valdez had positioned his people well. Cade felt a plasma bolt sear past his cheek, close enough to smell burning air. Another caught Thesa in the shoulder, spinning her around but not stopping her advance. The detonator! She shouted over the gunfire. Manual activation. Cade saw it, the control device lying near one of the explosive charges, knocked aside. During the initial confusion, if he could reach it, trigger the charges manually, the mission could still succeed. He broke from cover, sprinting across the open ground as plasma fire erupted around him. He was 3 steps from the detonator when he saw Valdez's rifle swinging toward him. The captain's scarred face twisted with rage. The plasma bolt would take him center mass, and there was nowhere to run, no cover to reach in time. Thesa hit him in a diving tackle that sent them both sprawling behind a boulder. The plasma bolt meant for Cade struck her in the back, punching through her armors, rear plating in a shower of sparks and superheated metal. She cried out, the first sound of pain he'd ever heard from her, and collapsed against the rock. Thesa! He caught her as she fell, his hands finding the massive breach in her armor. Coolant and synthetic blood leaked from the wound, and warning. Lights flashed across her heads-up display. The detonator, she gasped, her voice strained with pain. 5 more seconds and I can reach it. You're hurt. We need to. No time. She struggled to her feet, her armor's servo systems whining with the effort. Cover me. She broke from cover before he could stop her, her damaged armor sparking with each step. Valdez and his remaining men focused their fire on her, plasma bolts hammering against her weakened defenses. One caught her in the leg, another in her left arm, but she kept moving with the relentless determination that had defined their months together. Her gaunted hand closed around the detonator, just as another plasma bolt punched through her chest. Plate. She fell to her knees, the device clutched against her body, her armor systems failing in cascading waves of emergency alerts. 30 seconds, she said, her voice barely audible through her damaged CUM system. Get to cover. Cade started toward her, but she held up her hand. No, someone has to make it back. Someone has to tell them what happened here. The explosions began as he reached the lava tube entrance, a rolling thunder that brought down half the canyon wall. The insurgent staging area disappeared in a pillar of fire that lit up the night sky, taking with it the command structure that had threatened 3 worlds. He found her in the aftermath, half buried under rubble, but still alive. Her armor was shattered, its protective shell cracked open like an egg. For the first time since he'd known her, she looked small, vulnerable, heartbreakingly mortal. "Cade," she whispered as he knelt beside her, his hands finding the catches that would release her helmet. "I can single quotes the pain, ... I'm here," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm right here." Her helmet came away, revealing the face he'd learned to love. But now it was pale with shock, her amber eyes dim with approaching death. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth, and each breath came with visible effort. "Please," she whispered, her hand finding his with trembling fingers, "remove my armor. I don't want to die as a weapon. I want you to see ... me." With infinite gentleness, he began the process of removing her shattered armor. Each piece that came away revealed more of the woman he loved, broken but still beautiful, dying but still the most magnificent person he'd ever known. When the last of the protective shell was gone, she seemed even smaller, more fragile, utterly human despite her alien heritage. "There," she said, managing a smile that broke his heart. "Now you see me, all of me." "I've always seen you," he said, tears streaming down his face. "From the first day, I saw who you really were." "I love you," she whispered, her voice growing weaker. "Whatever happens next, remember that I chose this. I chose you." He held her as the light faded from her eyes, as the woman who had saved him, in every way possible, slipped away into whatever waited beyond. The mission was complete, the colony saved, but the cost was everything that mattered in those final moments. Cradled in his arms with her armor scattered around them like the shell of some beautiful creature, Sci-fi of the Moonrise Cliffs smiled one last time, not as a soldier, but as someone who had chosen to be known, to be loved, to be fully and completely human, despite the galaxy's efforts to make her into something else. Asterisk. The memorial service was held 3 days after the failed insurgent assault, when the smoke had cleared and the casualty reports were final. The attack that should have destroyed Nexus Prime had crumbled without its command structure, the scattered insurgent forces retreating into the wasteland in disarray. The colony survived, but the cost of that survival stood etched in black stone. At the center of the memorial garden, Lieutenant Cade Thompson read the names of the fallen, his voice steady despite the grief that threatened to overwhelm him. When he reached the final entry, Sci-fi of the Moonrise Cliffs, Krallick's 4th Legion, his voice caught slightly. The assembled colonists and military personnel bowed their heads in respect for the warrior who had saved them all. But it was what followed that would be remembered in the years to come. Cade stepped forward, placing his hand on the memorial stone, and spoke words that would echo across 2 civilizations. "We gather today to honor the fallen, but I want to speak about one person in particular. Most of you knew her as Thesa, the Krallick's warrior who helped transform our defenses, who fought beside us for months, who gave her life to save this colony. But she was more than a warrior, more than the armor she wore or the weapons she carried." He paused, collecting himself, remembering her last request to be seen without her armor. She was someone who loved the sunrise over the eastern mountains, someone who read poetry from a dozen different worlds, trying to understand what made each species unique. She was someone who worried about the families of soldiers under her command, who spent her off-duty hours learning to cook human food because she wanted to share our customs. The crowd was completely still, hanging on every word as he painted a picture of the woman behind the warrior's facade. "Thesa taught me that strength isn't about the armor we wear or the weapons we carry. It's about the courage to be vulnerable, to let others see who we really are beneath all our defenses." In her final moments, she asked me to remove her armor, because she wanted to be seen as herself, not as a weapon. That act of trust, that willingness to be completely known even in death, was the bravest thing I've ever witnessed. He turned to address both the human colonists and the Krolix delegation that had arrived for the ceremony. Our alliance isn't just about shared military objectives or political convenience. It's about recognizing that despite our differences, we share the same hopes, the same fears, the same capacity for love and sacrifice. Thesa embodied that truth. She built bridges between our peoples not through diplomacy, but through compassion. In the weeks that followed, Cade threw himself into the work of rebuilding. But his role had evolved beyond simple military duties. The Krolix High Command, impressed by the successful defense of Nexus Prime and moved by the accounts of Thessa's sacrifice, offered him a position as a cultural liaison, a bridge between species built on the foundation she had established. It was while cleaning out Thesa's quarters that he discovered the full scope of who she had been beneath the armor. Personal journals written in her native script, which he painstakingly translated with the help of Krolix linguists. Poetry she had written about her time on Nexus Prime, verses that spoke of finding beauty in a harsh world and love in the most unexpected places. There were recordings, too, messages she had prepared but never sent to her family on the Krolix home world. In them, she spoke of her growing affection for human customs, her admiration for their resilience, and carefully, delicately her feelings for a particular human officer who had taught her to see beyond duty to the person within. "I know this will be difficult for you to understand," she said in one recording, her image flickering in the blue light of the holographic display. "Our traditions teach us that attachment weakens the warrior, that love is a luxury we cannot afford. But I have learned something here among the humans that I think our people need to know. Love doesn't weaken us. It gives us something worth fighting for beyond mere survival." The recording continued with her describing Cade in terms that made his heart ache with loss and pride. She saw in him everything he had never recognized in himself: courage, compassion, a strength that came not from weapons or armor, but from the willingness to put others before himself. 6 months later, Cade stood before the Krolix Senaton, their homeworld, the first human to address their governing body in over a century. The chamber was magnificent, soaring crystalline walls that caught and reflected light in patterns that seemed to shift with the emotions of the speakers. Representatives from dozens of Krolix clans filled the curved seats, their formal armor gleaming in the multicolored illumination. "Honored senators," he began, using the formal address Thessa had taught him, "I come before you not as a representative of humanity's government, but as someone who was privileged to know one of your daughters as she truly was." He spoke of Thessa's sacrifice, but more importantly, he spoke of her growth, her evolution from a warrior who saw only tactical objectives to a person who understood that the greatest victories were won through understanding and compassion. He shared her journals, her poetry, her recorded messages, painting a picture of someone who had found a way to honor her duty while embracing her humanity. "Your daughter taught me that armor isn't just metal and ceramic plates," he said, his voice carrying to the farthest reaches of the chamber. "It's all the barriers we build to protect ourselves from being truly known." She chose to remove that armor, to trust me with her authentic self, and in doing so, she showed me the path to real strength. The speech sparked debates that would continue for years, challenging traditional Krolix concepts of duty and emotional attachment. But it also opened doors that had been closed for generations, creating opportunities for cultural exchange that went far beyond military alliances. Cade's new role took him across the galaxy, facilitating communication between human and Krolix settlements, helping to resolve conflicts that arose from misunderstanding rather than malice. Everywhere he went, he carried Thesa's story with him, sharing her example of what was possible when people chose to see beyond surface differences to the common hopes that bound all sentient life together. Years later, when the first human Krolix Cultural Center was established on Nexus Prime, the dedication ceremony drew representatives from both species. The building was designed to blend architectural elements from both civilizations, creating something new that honored both traditions while pointing toward a shared future dot. At the center of the complex stood a garden, where two different ecosystems had been carefully merged earth plants growing alongside flora from the Krolix homeworld, separate but complementary, creating beauty that neither could achieve alone. At the heart of the garden was a fountain carved from crystalline stone, its flowing water catching the light in patterns that shifted with the time of day. Cade stood beside the fountain as the ceremony concluded, watching children from both species playing together in the garden. Their laughter was universal, transcending language and culture in a way that gave him hope for the future Lisa had died to protect. A young Krolix female approached, her formal armor marking her as military, but her bearing suggesting youth and curiosity rather than the rigid discipline Cade remembered from his first encounters with her people. "Lieutenant Thompson?" she said, her accent similar to Thesa's, but softer, more musical. "I am Yesekai Ron, 3rd Legion. I wanted to thank you for what you said about my sister." "Sister?" Cade looked at her more carefully, seeing the resemblance. Now the same bone structure, the same amber eyes that seemed to hold inner fire. "Thesa was my clutch sister," Yessa explained, using a term that indicated they had hatched from eggs laid at the same time. "She spoke of you in her final message to our family. She said you had shown her what it meant to be truly alive." Cade felt the familiar ache of loss mixed with something else, a warmth that came from knowing Thesa's impact had rippled outward, touching lives he would never know. "She changed me too. She taught me that love isn't a weakness to be hidden, but a strength to be shared." "I have read her journals," Yessa said quietly, "the ones you helped translate and publish. They are causing quite a revolution among our young people. Many are beginning to question whether our old ways truly serve us, or if they simply keep us from experiencing the fullness of life." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the fountain's play of light and water. Finally, Yessa spoke again. "She left something for you. I was instructed to give it to you only when I felt you were ready to receive it." From beneath her armor, she withdrew a small package wrapped in cloth that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. Inside was a piece of carved crystal, no larger than his palm, that seemed to capture and hold the light of both suns overhead. "It's a memory stone," Yessa explained, "an ancient tradition among our people. We carve them to hold our most precious thoughts, our deepest feelings. She made this for you in the weeks before the final mission." Cade turned the stone over in his hands, feeling its warm weight. There was an activation stud along one edge, and when he pressed it, Thesa's voice filled the air around them, not the clipped military tones he remembered, but the soft, vulnerable voice she had used in their most intimate moments. "My beloved Cade," the recording began, and his heart clenched at hearing her speak his name with such tenderness. "If you are hearing this, then the worst has happened, and I am no longer with you. I want you to know that every moment we shared was precious to me, more valuable than all the victories I have won or honors I have earned." The recording continued, her voice painting pictures of their time together, the quiet conversations during watch duty, the stolen moments of intimacy, the way he had made her feel like more than just a weapon pointed at the enemy. "I know you will blame yourself for my death," she said, her voice holding a note of gentle reproach. "Don't. Every choice I made was my own, and I made them gladly because I finally understood what I was fighting for. Not just for the Alliance, not just for duty, but for the future we dreamed of, a future where love transcends the boundaries between worlds." The stone's glow began to fade as the message neared its end. "Promise me, my heart, that you will not let grief consume the joy we found together. Live fully, love freely, and know that somewhere among the stars, I am waiting for you. Until we meet again in whatever lies beyond this life, carry my love with you like armor that no weapon can pierce. The garden was silent except for the gentle sound of the fountain and the distant laughter of children. Cade clutched the memory stone to his chest, feeling Thesa's presence more strongly than he had since her death. She knew, he said wonderingly. She knew what would happen, and she prepared for it. My sister always could see farther than the rest of us, Yessa replied. She saw the person you could become, the future our peoples could build together. Her death was not an ending, but a beginning. As the twin suns set over Nexus Prime, painting the sky in the same amber hues as Thesa's eyes, Cade made a silent promise to the woman who had taught him to look beyond armor to the person within. He would continue their work, continue building the bridges she had started, and ensure that her sacrifice created the future she had envisioned. The memorial garden would grow over the years, becoming a place where beings from a dozen different species came to learn about cooperation, understanding, and the transformative power of love that recognizes no boundaries. At its heart, the fountain would continue to flow, its crystal waters reflecting the light of many suns, a testament to the truth Thesa had died to prove that love, not war, was the force that would ultimately unite the galaxy. And sometimes, when the light was just right and the water caught the sun at the perfect angle, visitors to the garden swore they could see two figures reflected in the fountain's depths, a human man and an alien woman, their hands intertwined, their love transcending death itself, their story living on in the hearts of all who believed that understanding was stronger than hatred. And that true strength came not from the armor we wore, but from the courage to let others see who we really were beneath it all.